Campbell.
Here.
Tom Hagelin.
Here.
Sue Kern.
Here.
Ruth Nelson.
Here.
Bob Nystrom. 5 of the 6 present.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Welcome, everybody, on this balmy Thursday afternoon, which is a little bit unusual for our board meetings, but thanks for rearranging your schedules. We will begin with approval of the agenda. There are no changes.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Director Nelson, second by Director Kern. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up is public input.
Not in a special meeting.
Not in a special meeting, even though it's on our agenda.
Shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Not on a special board meeting, you don't have public input. Did I not catch that?
Okay, we'll go without public input. There is one of them that is related to one of our agenda items that I'll incorporate that as we get to that piece. Next up is approval of our minutes from June 8th.
I would. Okay. Second.
Motion by Director Campbell, second by Director Kern. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item is approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Motion by Director Nelson, second by Director Blacklands. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll move right into new business, and we'll start with our Blueprint 181 project updates from the ICS team. Damien, are you there?
I'm here.
All right.
How'd I get so lucky? All right, I'll present my screen here. All right, so here is our Bear Public Schools bond improvements update for, oh my gosh, I grabbed the wrong. Hang on, bear with me a second. There we go. Let's try that one. All right, here's our pond improvements update for June 25th, 2020. Our agenda items include project updates, high school South Campus schematic design review, and then
It's not connected. Okay, we're with you.
It's coming.
No,
Damien, are you still there?
It's one of them. This is the power.
I hear him out in the hallway.
I had it here.
I'm seeing everything there except for,
So
Where's-
why didn't connect in? Oh, so we're trying to do. Oh, okay. Looking for his presentation.
We have to provide filler. Should we say the pledge again?
Damien, are you back? You're muted right now. Say it again. No, we can't hear you.
can't hear you.
Hang on a minute, Damien. We've got problems here. Hang on a second.
Can you hear us now?
There we go.
All right, can you hear Scott?
Yes.
Fantastic. You want to go back to the Brainerd High School slide, Damien?
It should be, well, you betcha.
All right.
This
Oh,
is June
I
8th.
think it will.
Yeah.
Here we go. Got it.
Okay. So as I was saying before, the carpeting's being installed in the upper level areas 1 and 3. We're getting VCT going through the hallways. We did have our above ceiling inspection. We got final pad going in. Fin tubes being installed. That was being held up due to COVID shipments out of New York. So we finally got all that on site. We got all of our long lead time lights in place. Well, on site, I should say, that were held up due to COVID. So all that stuff's getting installed. We're gonna get bathrooms, fixtures going in, and then partitions here in the next couple of weeks. So area 1 on the lower level or main level, working north of CC, grid line CC, same deal. We had the water damage on a few weeks back, so that's all opened up there and out. We're gonna start reinstalling the sheetrock, and we've got finishes going in, the sound systems, VSIs there, final lights. Once we get the wall patched back up, then we will go ahead and put the carpet in, and it'll be done as well. Auditorium interior footings are going. We're starting structural steel on the inside of the auditorium. All the catwalk steel is done. Most mechanicals complete. Fire suppression. We're getting started on electrical rough-ins in the auditorium itself. The rest of area 2. Interior framing is primarily complete. We just got some high soffits left to do. Rough-ins are going very, very well. The exterior glass is going on the building. If you drove by recently, you'll see that. Sheetrock's up, tape. We're going to be painting next week, so that area is looking really, really good as well. The interior courtyard work, we do have the jack and bore pit in place. They will be digging it either later today or tomorrow, and then we're going to start jacking underneath the G-Link on Monday. We're going to be continuing our footings going to the west and just keep hard charging through that area. The remodeled zone in area 3, the new ECD wing has got paint. We're going to have grid going in there today. We're looking to start getting our finishes done, mechanical MEP finishes installed. So everything's going really, really well in there. H-Link as well. Area 8, we're just getting the last of our structural columns in, and we got rough-ins going in there as well. So that's kind of a really quick run through of the areas there. The kitchen tile, which was approved last board meeting, so that's all been framed in, and that's going as well.
Okay.
Any questions as to North Campus?
We're wondering if we've got the right PowerPoint up, and then also, Damien, if you can mute when others are presenting. But any questions for Scott?
Yeah, do we have the June 8th PowerPoint up?
I think we might, because it looks awfully similar to the one.
Yeah, me too, the same pictures and such, and it didn't seem like what you were talking about, Scott, followed your bullet points that you've got on your
Yeah.
sheet.
Damon, you had the right one up originally.
Yeah, I haven't put a different one up, so it's really strange. I will, I'll do some digging here while they do the South Campus. So our next step is South Campus with our schematic design review. So we'll let Scott share his screen, and I'll fix mine while he's doing that.
Perfect.
You bet. And I should be sharing if I did everything correctly. All right. Can everybody see my Blueprint 181 South Campus schematic design
Yep.
presentation screen?
Yep.
Fantastic. That being said, I'm going to hand it over to Valerie.
Hi, everyone. Nice seeing you guys again. I'm Valerie Peterson with World Architects and Engineers. I'm glad to be back. Today we have an exciting new design as part of your overall Blueprint 181 path. This is the essentially reinventing South Campus into a special ed transition and a level 4 space. So where we are now is we are wrapping up schematic design. We have gone through a core group process. And the core group has been really exciting and really dynamic, especially talking about all of their unique needs. And they've been very communicative and as well as thinking kind of outside of the box, you know, removing the limitations of what's in their current facilities, either at the White House or at Lincoln Educational Center, and thinking about what could it be. So that's kind of been one of the main items that the group was challenged with. So through this process, we started out learning about guiding principles and design criteria. The guiding principles is kind of that 50,000 foot view, like what are our ideals of this project? And then the design criteria is more, a little bit more specific and gets a little closer to a detailed view. So some of the main guiding principles is that the design should should support the collaborative and positive culture at Lincoln Education Center, Paul Bunyan Transition Plus, and the STARS program. As well, with all of the other renovations you've been doing, we should provide safe and secure, also feeling welcoming and inviting for students, staff, and visitors. The layout of the building should incorporate principles of universal design, be inclusive and accessible for all. And then also one of the main drivers of the plan that you will see in a couple slides is that the building should create a defined separation between the behavior-based program and the transition-based program. And really that's out of respect for all the students learning and also maintaining safety concerns to allow staff to quickly respond to that. Of course, the design should be fiscally responsible, consider longevity, durability, and ease of maintenance, and that's going to be one of the guiding drivers as we get into material selection in our next phase. Also, the design should provide flexible spaces to support services and foster interactions between students, parents, visitors, and also members of the community, including the other partnerships that the programs have with outside groups. Small group space is encouraged for all levels of activities. And really one of the main goals here is to create a cohesive experience for all three programs. They kind of feel very independently operated, and the staff are very excited to have kind of a larger group and a larger team. And one of the biggest drivers here is preparing all students for success after high school, especially in the transitions, is through learning occupational and independent living skills. Some of our design criteria is to provide opportunities for flexible take-a-break spaces in all programs to promote de-escalation and limit the use of seclusion rooms. So I think some of the users came to these meetings thinking,
Hang on, Valerie, we lost your audio. Are you back? Valerie?
okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just going off of the first design criteria to provide opportunities for take-a-break spaces with the spirit to limit seclusion rooms. They kind of want to provide opportunities not only for the opportunities for the student to control ways of de-escalating, and there's a couple of new ways of doing that will show up in the design. And then also our specialty labs and activity areas should also be located adjacent to each other. Let's see, what else do we have? All student spaces should be easily monitored and accessible by staff. The design should be thoughtful in the placement of the care and treatment classroom to allow for privacy and limited interaction with other programs. The main entry should be, or used by students and visitors should be secure, which is one of the items I talked about previously. Another positive is that the programs can share an administrative space. All interior and exterior doors should be lockable, and that we will have to continue to consider enhanced security measures, especially on the building environment. Sensory stimuli should be thoughtfully considered in the design of all spaces. So that means lighting, that means colors, that means textures, and even patterns. And the building should create learning environments that consider acoustic. Also, we should create home-like and career-based environments for the transitional programs. I see Amy has stepped up to the podium too. Amy, have I missed anything or anything you want to elaborate on?
Nope, not at this time. Thanks.
Okay.
Mary.
All right. So with that, we'll start to get into the diagram. So here's kind of an aerial shot of South Campus today. The area in blue is the portion of the building that will remain, and then the area dashed in orange is representative of site work that will likely happen for additional parking. And here's an overall building plan, just to kind of get your frame of reference right. Scott, if you wouldn't mind hovering over where the students enter right now, it's kind of in that little bump out square. So that's where students currently use as an entrance point. So everything to the left of that orange line would remain. Everything to the right would be demolished. That leaves about 72,000 square feet of existing building that would remain. So here's our overall schematic design diagram that we came up with the core planning group. At the very top part, kind of the blue color, that is the STARS program. To the left of that, the teal color is the Paul Bunyan Transitions Plus program. The green portion would represent the Lincoln Education Center. And then the purple zone is that shared administration space between all three programs. We were to use the new parking lot to the east as what would become our main entry for the facility for visitors. People would enter in through that area and check in. Also, that's likely where the LEC buses would drop off. Throughout the day, we know that STARS and Paul Bunyan Transition Plus often has to come and go more frequently. They do a lot of outside programs, either for jobs or just visiting other community items. So they do have a secondary option for them to get onto their rideshare programs or their other transportation needs. And that's to the north, essentially where the students currently enter into the facility now. And then once the next few slides, and Scott, go to the next one, will start to be enlarged plans of the different programs. So again, same color coding. The blue is the STARS, and the teal color is the Paul Bunyan Transitions Plus. So a lot of, one of the main goals of this whole project is to add additional capacity for all the programs. So you can see that there's a growth/flex room for STARS as well as Transitions Plus. And that is essentially future capacity. However, they can use it flexibly now. You'll see some very small rooms labeled B/O, and that's some of those breakout rooms that can either allow outside services or to come in and meet with students. And also students can either do individual work or some small group work, excuse me, with some transparency and some openness to a larger, large breakout space, living room space. And then if you can hover around those life skill labs, Scott, both programs have a life skill lab, and that is, you know, kind of that apartment-like setting where it has a kitchen and a table. These are kind of placed really nicely with the idea that the spaces can either break out to the plan north into the large group breakout space, or they can expand into the training academy when they do want to do large group meals or kind of entertaining. So it has some flexibility to really adapt and grow depending on what the need is for that day in that life skills lab. Anything you want to touch on, Amy, for that one?
No, thank you.
And then here is the Lincoln. So this is kind of the south portion of the building. From the, one of the drivers here again is not only growth, but also how we kind of bundle together the different classrooms. So on the kind of south area, you'll see an elementary 1, and then elementary 2 is actually, because currently Lincoln has 1 elementary classroom. So the second one is the growth. And then the middle school currently has 2 classrooms, the third one's the growth. So the idea was to kind of bundle the elementary and middle school classrooms together, as well as then bundle the high school classrooms together. And those are what is in the current cafeteria, the new high school classrooms. Another thing that I mentioned earlier was that the special consideration should be given for the care and treatment room, and that those should be fairly isolated. So those are located right there, and we actually kind of developed a small suite for them, so they can kind of come into their own little lobby space and then go into their own classroom. So throughout the day, if the students go back and forth from classrooms, they do not have to go into the public corridors of the Lincoln Education Center. And then you can also see our specialists are clustered together. We have our gym, we have our life skills lab, our fitness, and then our games maker lab and flex specialty lab. Some items to point out on, I just want to go back. I want to show some of those opportunities to de-escalate without going to a seclusion room. So the seclusion rooms are kind of salmon colored and in 3 areas. Yep, thanks, Scott. So that's the second one, and the third one's over by the fitness area. So we have those as our seclusion room. In every classroom, you can kind of start to see like 2.5 walls that with an A inside of it. Those are what we're just kind of calling alcoves. They do not have a door on it, but they're large enough for a student to go in and either be blinded from a visual distraction that they were having, or to reset themselves. And with the idea that they can still hear and maybe even see some of the teaching and learning that is still happening within the room. And there's 2 of those for every classroom. Another item just outside of some classrooms, especially in the high school area, is there is some small breakout spaces for students to get into for that as well. And then we have our sensory rooms as well. There's one towards the elementary middle school, and then there's one up by the high school. Okay, Amy, would you like to chime in?
If you're looking at all 3 of the programs coming together, I just think that the design team has done such a nice job of thinking of the clients that we serve, thinking of the students that we serve in our district, and just really creating neat spaces for them to be able to continue to be a part of the education that they're being provided every day. So thank you, Valerie. You've done a great job. It's been fun to work with you.
Thank you. I think finally we have just a space for our admin, just to show where some of that admin spaces is going. And I think one nice thing that came out of this was actually kind of creating the student support services, which is labeled Nystrom Northern Pines in a conference room. Those are spaces that really those staff are meant to integrate a lot with students, and a way to put them closer to the students without the students having to go through the administration office or going through reception for that. That's what we have for the diagram.
I did have one question.
What?
In terms of there being 3 entrances, how will the safety and security really work for that, and how will that be monitored throughout the day?
Yeah, let's stop right there. So once kind of the first bell rings type of scenario, the STARS, Paul Bunyan Transition Plus, and the one that's labeled LEC student entry would be locked. And then visitors would be forced through that parent visitor main entry, where then they would be cycled through the reception area just south of that, that's labeled main office, to do the check-in process. From that point, they can navigate into STARS Paul Bunyan, or they can navigate just south into Lincoln.
Okay.
Those extra entrances are mostly going to just be used for students who are accessing community throughout the course of the day.
Okay, thank you.
Will LAC students still be going over to the high school? Some?
Those that are ready to do that, yes, will
Okay.
still have access to high school.
Okay, and this is probably safer than what we currently do, but they still have to cross, gonna have to cross the street.
Yep. Yes.
And I don't know, did I miss still have the kitchen and the cafeteria, or did we use up that space?
Yep, there is.
There isn't a
I believe
cafeteria.
the cafeteria and it says serving bay, and then
Oh.
it says cafeteria sort of by the sensory room right there. Can you see on
Can
that
you,
slide?
can you explain that though a little bit so that, because there really is, my understanding, there really isn't a cafeteria, but shared by all three programs. So can you explain a little bit of the flow of how that'll be?
Yes, so at this time, all of our different programs, the students eat in their classrooms. So we use the cafeteria for serving, retrieving their meals, and then going back to their classrooms, and we eat in their classrooms in a different age group.
So
in their
whereas
classroom.
currently they'll go down 2 flights of stairs to get their lunch and then go back to their classroom, is that right?
Correct,
And then, this obviously is a lot more convenient,
yes.
more user-friendly.
But there also is some breakout space in there so that if we wanted to do classrooms combined for lunches, we could do that.
Okay. Great.
The little cafeteria area too is it's strategically connected to the training academy, to give some options of, if there is a graduation or a really large group celebration, that some of that can push and pull in between. So it makes the training academy a little bit or more accessible for use of the LEC. But then the training academy can be locked down so that there's no interaction between the transitions and LEC if needed.
Okay, great. Any other questions from anyone? So we'll be looking for approval of the schematic design a little bit later here.
How many parking spaces will be in the parking lot?
Well, right now, Director Blacklance, we are working through our civil, because there's a certain amount of parking spaces that we have to keep for the North Campus and the Aquatic Center. And then you can see this is just a preliminary diagram, and nobody, I don't think, has seen this because we just got it kind of wrapped up late last night. And this is kind of based off of a review with Norby and Reed, building and grounds, and kind of what was needed from a site standpoint. But we're still working out grade corrections on the west side to implement the playground into that space. But based off of what's needed on the east side of the building and incorporating that bus drop-off into these plans, this is preliminarily what we're thinking it's going to end up looking like. And the goal of that is to keep the net amount of parking spaces similar to what was planned for North Campus, as well as keep what South Campus has currently. If that makes sense.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to mention, we are going to be issuing this out for community input here in the next couple weeks. So that process will still be happening.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, as far as parking goes, I know this is a really tight area, so we don't want to overbuild parking spaces. So if you're trying to keep South Campus the same as what it was, it's a smaller building, and it has less, maybe it doesn't have less staff, but I'm thinking it might. I just think we should take a really quick look and see if we really need that many parking spaces, because we don't have enough area for the playground and.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're gonna,
Understood.
transportation isn't gonna be there anymore, so all those parking spaces we don't need. So I wouldn't wanna overbuild parking spaces.
Yep, we agree. And we do need to, though, hit our parking counts for the North Campus. So with the performing arts center being at 1,200 person capacity and a 500 capacity aquatic arts center, and then the school itself, there is a kind of a minimum that we have to hit. So we're trying to. This parking lot was initially, when we were talking parking counts last year or 2 years ago now, we were relying on a certain number of parking stalls to be provided on the South Campus lot in order to serve that North Campus additions. So just so everybody's
Initially,
aware.
though, the parking that you're referring to on the east side of South Campus, that was there to accommodate South Campus, but as far as the physical education wing or the swimming pool and the gymnasiums and such of North Campus, it was more to provide handicap accessible parking at those spots so that it was easier for them to enter to a ball game or to some kind of thing that's being offered in the gymnasium or the pool, because the walk was so far from the east side of Fifth Street. And so when we talked about this, that many of those spots were going to be so that if grandparents were coming or somebody that had a handicap or was disabled, broken leg or something like that, that they had easier access into the buildings for events that were coming about. And so that was a lot of the conversation that we had initially in that space, because the parking is a long way away from the FIAD or from the gymnasium wing across Fifth Street.
I just want to make sure we have some green space,
Yep,
and so it
I
doesn't
agree.
look like it's parking
Yep,
right in
yeah, we're trying to maximize green space. We're gonna be doing a survey on the lower, on the southwest side of the building, because we're gonna be incorporating the playground into that area and figure out how to maximize that space.
Because right now, it looks like there's parking all around the whole building.
That's what I think too. It's the one
This
in
looks-
the upper left that is a surprise to me, that that's still that big.
Well, I'm wondering about this one back here. I guess that's going to deliveries, but. that's
This one,
interesting.
We
yep.
still need that for food service. So we
Yeah.
at least need the pavement.
Okay.
Whether,
Yeah,
we could remove the stalls, but the pavement will still be needed.
Right, we were talking about incorporating this pavement into the blacktop for basketball courts or something to that effect, because
It
most
just
likely
looks
the
like-
playground's going to be
The whole building is right
in
now
this
surrounded by
area.
parking.
Again, today is schematic design, and so I would like the people that are drawing to to come back with all that information regarding how many spots it is, how much do we need, because I agree, this isn't approving of design development, the final design. Now we're going to get some additional input. And if we decide that we
Yep.
don't need all those parking spots, now is the time where we're going to be able to make those modifications. So please hear what she's asked about when you're looking at the drawings of that, moving into design development.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we haven't even seen an
Yeah.
outside rendering
Right.
yet,
Nope.
so this is just approval
This
for the
is
inside.
just schematic, yep,
Yeah,
just
for
the
the
kind of the
building.
Yep.
outside layout, so, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, can I add one more
And
thing?
then here's the budget.
I'll do it later.
No, I'm just kidding. Please.
Okay, I mentioned this in the project oversight, but I want to keep mentioning it with COVID and everything like that, that we need to relook at everything for touch-free wherever we can. And this is a new project, and I know we didn't do that for some of our early projects. But I just want all the design people to know that, and any place, like even in the high school, if we haven't ordered stuff or whatever, and we can make changes to that, we should do that. And I know you're concerned about touch-free toilets, but at least touch-free faucets would be good. And doors that, the original door, you don't have to open and shut. So, thank you.
Okay, any other questions regarding South Campus?
Well, even on the touch-free, I don't know if it's ADA acceptable or not, but I know you go to like St. Cloud State and a few other institutions where they have those little foot pedals, at least in the male bathrooms. You just use your foot to pull it out, so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
We're still seeing South Campus.
We'll see if this works.
Looks like it's coming. We're seeing South Campus, but is that yours?
Yep, should be. So there was a slide that you were supposed to have a little earlier.
Yep.
So,
There
all right.
it is.
So, all right, moving forward, New Baxter Elementary, Justin Moninga.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
So New Baxter Elementary, the project is moving as planned. I'm very happy with the progress we've made as of late. The classroom wing, the 2-story section of building, the bulk of that has been final cleaned, so essentially done. Site work, basically all site concrete, not all of it, but 99% of the site concrete is in place. First lift of asphalt will be going in the next 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks actually. The playground equipment, that'll be installed and done end of this week here. And really where it finishes throughout the remaining areas, majority of flooring's in place. The painting's basically done. Some miscellaneous carpentry like doors and hardware, adjustment, stuff like that's going on. That slab on grade, it's all for gymnasium number 2. That's all ready to pour. It's going to be poured on Monday. So the precast is up, the roof's on, all the undergrounds are done. And we're going to put that last final piece of precast up on Wednesday after the slab on grade's poured. We're right on schedule, and it's looking pretty awesome. Any questions on New Baxter Elementary?
No?
Nisswa Elementary, this is progressing quite well as well. So basically, all metal framing is done. So the demo's done, the framing's done. We're nearly roughed in. We're calling it section 1, which would be the southeast portion of the building. That's actually sheetrocked as of now, and we'll just keep moving towards the north. Exterior metal panels, that's basically done. We have started the terrazzo flooring. Probably about 50% of terrazzo flooring's in place. And there are a few miscellaneous aluminum doors and windows that are going in. And this week, we did the bulk of the concrete, the exterior concrete, the sidewalks, curb-based sidewalks, stuff like that. So again, we are tracking as we should be, and pretty happy with where the status of this was. Again, I'll open that up for questions.
Any questions? No?
Okay, the Warrior Early Learning Center. The same update as the last meeting. Prime contracts have been sent out and executed. The permitting process is now complete. We are working on submittals. Of course, conversation will have to be had on when we're going to start the project due to COVID and how that scenario plays out. But if we are able to start as planned, we are ready to roll.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Justin. Hey, Kyle Walter, are you on the call
Yep.
still?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Quick update on Harrison. So we continue with their exterior site work. If you've driven by there, they actually are done paving the staff lot. They're out there forming right now for concrete sidewalks. The remainder of our concrete sidewalks are on the playground. And then we'll continue with fencing and then probably some landscaping on the east side of the building. And then we'll wait till the west side of the building to landscape until right before, since that's where all the district and the contractor storage is. Otherwise, inside, we are framing on the existing side of the building. We will, by the end of this week, the majority of all the framing on all 3 levels will be complete on that existing side. And then we are working on structural steel for the stair install that we tore out. That will now become a floor. So they are just wrapping up, tying in a bunch of that steel, working through some bed items, obviously tying into some of those old clay tile block floors and stuff like that becomes a little bit of a challenge, but working through some of that right now. Otherwise, on the new side of the building, we received our wood ceilings, so those are going in on first floor. They'll then transition up into the library side of things and continue with that, as well as some other interior finishes. We have the wood chair rail that went in here throughout this week. We've been buttoning up some wall tile, finished some fixes in the quarry tile in the kitchen, and all the kitchen equipment is in and connected right now. So the kitchen's looking very, very well. And then we're looking at kind of cleaning out some of the existing gym stuff and looking at painting that here within the next week or 2 to keep things going. So all in all, Harrison is we're plugging away pretty good. We've got some good commitment from the contractors here lately to get a lot of people in there, and hope to see some sheetrock coming in the next couple of weeks when we get all of our inspections. So happy with the progress so far. So we'll continue to push. Any questions?
Any questions? No?
Okay, so we'll jump to Garfield. Again, we've been working on some underground electrical and plumbing rough-ins throughout the building, and then on the exterior of the building as well. Footings and foundations are ongoing. We have 3 out of the 4 additions we're doing this year. Foundations are in and backfilled, and they are working on the 2 classroom addition on the southwest corner. And they have half of the footings and foundations poured in that location. Looking at finishing up that this week and then jumping into backfill. Our exterior masonry walls will start next week, and then structural steel will follow once those are complete. Otherwise, inside, we got our plumbing inspection for our underground plumbing in the trenches. They are backfilling those and shooting for Friday or Monday to pour all the interior saw cuts back in. The painter was on site earlier this week getting some walls prepped on the classrooms that we're just kind of doing a facelift on. And then the steel stud contractor is on site as well, starting to do layout and shoot track in. So a lot of good progress there, kind of all over in different areas, since some areas are a little bit more heavy than others, but some good progress to date. So any questions on Garfield?
No?
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right. Lowell Elementary, foundation systems for the new gym and classroom tower are nearing completion. Underground utilities and underground mechanical systems are ongoing at the classroom tower and the admin entrances. Minor interior work taking place to support the exterior underground activities. Steel erection at the classroom tower is scheduled to start the week after 4th of July. And then precast scheduled to start mid-July. Things are moving right along. We'll be all set for when the precast wall panels come to the site. We did have a small delay with that with a COVID case at the plant in Albany, at the Wells plant. But we did structure the schedule a little, change the schedule a little bit, got ahead on some other areas to compensate for it. So things are moving right along. Any questions on Lowell?
No?
Okay. Riverside Elementary, foundation systems for Area B classrooms and new gym are nearing completion. Underground utility and mechanical systems are underway at the Area B classrooms and new gym. Painting in Area A has started. Lighting and electrical renovations are continuing in Area A, and the precast schedule is going to start the week after 4th of July. So Riverside Elementary will be the first week, the week after 4th of July, and the following week will be Lowell as far as the precast wall panels. So we can see cranes in place up in the air, swinging some large concrete panels. So that's always fun. Any questions on that?
No?
Okay. All right, Justin's gonna jump on again. He's gonna talk about the AV bid review, the elementary schools.
Yeah, I think I'll share my screen here real quick. it allows me to. Actually not able to share my screen. Odd. Well, I'll talk about it. I'm not able to share my screen. I think I have to have different permissions, but, oh, there I have the option. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
We can see it, but can you enlarge it?
Yes.
Or it's,
Is that better?
Yeah.
So in your board packet, you should have this recommendation for contract award. We, on June 11th, we opened bids and actually had 3 bidders for this project. And just to recap, this includes the Harrison project, the Nisswa project, and the Baxter Elementary project. So Digital Horizons, AVI, and Video Service Incorporated all bid. And the low for base bid is Video Service Incorporated, as I have identified here. Back to the recommendation letter, we are recommending to award base bid and not to accept alternate number 1, which is the portable video systems. And then I also have Video Services Incorporated's proposal here as well, $306,020. So with that, is there any questions?
any questions from anyone? Nope.
Justin, do you want to just talk about the virtual bidding? How that worked and?
Yeah, so the virtual bidding, how we handled that, we sent out a link so people, bidders could watch it live, and also that video is saved. So we actually have that in the bid invite or in the bidding documents that contractors would have to drop their bids off outside of the building, received by us, by the district, and then we opened them like we normally would, but no audience, and it was recorded and presented live. It actually I thought it went pretty well, all things considered.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, that's everything. Do you guys have any other questions at all?
Any questions? It looks like we're good. You guys are doing a great job of keeping us updated, and thank you.
Yep, there is a lot of work going on right now. I think last month with the contractors was somewhere around $7 million. So, if you can imagine, it's $7 million worth of work going on each month right now, if not maybe a little more than that. So, don't blink, it's happening really fast. So, just we're gonna keep it rolling, so.
Oh, that's great.
All right.
We could see that when we
Have a
went
great
to the high
afternoon.
school today.
Yeah, the high school looked great and clean, yeah, I was impressed on how nice and clean they
You know, these
keep
projects
things
are.
going, yeah.
All right, good work, guys. And gals, Valerie. Okay, so for action, then we'll move into letter C, which is approval of our first wave of the video VA systems as presented.
I still move approval of the contract with ICS on that project there on number C.
Second?
Okay, so we have a motion by Director Campbell and second by Director Blacklands for approval of the VA contract as presented with Video Services Incorporated. Any further discussion?
I think they're the same ones at the high school too.
Yes, they are the same ones that we have at the high school. Yep.
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up then would be approval of our schematic design review for South Campus as presented.
Also move.
I will second.
Thank you. Motion by Director Nelson, second by Director Kern for approval of the schematic design for South Campus. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to say I'm so excited for all of those, the staff and the kids that'll be serviced by that. It's gonna be a vast improvement.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. You bet.
Amazing. Yeah.
Good for our region. Okay, hearing no other comments, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up is going to be a presentation on Chromebooks for Forest View. And I think Sarah's going to be, Sarah is joining us, and our superintendent, Lane Larson, is going to share some data or comments first.
Yeah, thank you very much. I asked Director Hagelin if it was okay if I went first, because I thought that some of the pieces that we've learned about in the last week as to what to expect going into the fall of this school year will really give a lot of background into why Sarah is here today to talk about additional technology for our school district. And so I'd like to start by talking a little bit about what happened last Thursday. I believe it was around 10 o'clock, something like that. We, superintendents in the state were notified that there was going to be a meeting with the Commissioner Richter from MDE, and they were going to outline what they knew so far as expectations coming back to school next fall. And so Assistant Superintendent Heidi Hahn and myself, we sat in the meeting and listened to her. And at that time, to make a very long conversation short, we were asked to do three things, to have three pathways that we're planning for as we look forward to the coming school year. And these three pathways are outlined in a document that is very changeable from week to week. But this document is over 100 pages in length when it talks about what the expectations are for school districts. Prior to the last week in July, we should hear what the expectations for starting the school year look like. But in the interim, we're supposed to start looking at three models. The first model, the one we hope, but the one we also are a little bit reluctant to guess, would be kids coming back, full numbers, classes resumed just like we were last year. The second model that they've asked us to look at is the distance model again. If something happens that COVID is such a high level, what does distance learning look like coming back for the school year? And having gone through the distance model from March 15th or 18th, I guess it was, till the end of the school year, we know that we have a pretty good idea of what a distance learning model looks like. But we've done a lot of surveys since that time and gotten a lot of input from our teachers, from parents, and from some of our children, particularly at the middle and high school level, as to what worked well. What do we need support with if we have to do a distance learning model? What do we need to do it even better now that we have more time to plan? And so that was the second model that we were tasked with looking at. The third model is a hybrid model, and something that none of us have done before. But what it means is that you may have some students on site while others are distance learning at the same time. And what they told us is that in a school district like our size, it could mean that you have distance learning, one building doing distance learning because of an outbreak or something. You might have a number of your classes doing a hybrid model, and maybe some where all the students are back. But the one thing that they told us that was probably the most challenging as we thought about it is that we have to be prepared during the school year next year to have all three models ready to go so that we could switch from one model to another model at any given time during the school year. And again, it doesn't mean that every building in every district will necessarily have to be implementing the same model that other buildings in the school district are modeling. And it gave us some really vague but distinct expectations of what special education should look like, what extracurricular might look like, and so on, as we left that meeting last Thursday. It could not have been more timely, because as the Board of Education and everyone knows, we were fortunate to participate in a 3-day training that was provided by Sourcewell on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at Grandview. And Sourcewell did such a beautiful job of aligning it by district, having everybody be able to social distance, to do many of our meetings through Zoom. If they were a large group, they were all done by Zoom. But our individual schools could break into smaller teams of people. And I cannot tell you how proud you should be of the 22 or 24 people, the administrative team that came to do the work that we did the last 3 days. Once again, it was kind of like March 15th when we were asked to have something ready to go by March 18th, and everybody put their gloves on and went to work. And we have, by the time we left that meeting, we spent a significant amount of our time, aside from the trainings that we were fortunate to have through Sourcewell, but we spent a significant amount of time developing what we think a hybrid model might look like in our elementary schools. We have 3 different models of what a hybrid model might look like at our secondary level for middle school and high school. And we also talked about what it would look like at Lincoln Education Center and the Brainerd Learning Center. And as we shared, when we developed all 3 models, we did all 3 of them. We did the foundational work for all students returning, distance learning, what that looks like, how we can improve, and that's where Sarah's going to come in a lot to talk about what we need to do to meet the technological needs of our learners in a distance learning model. But a hybrid model is also distance learning with some people on site. And so we knew that when we were looking at distance learning, it needed to encompass how we were going to adjust in a hybrid model or in an all distance learning model. We have incredible templates ready to go. They are not in stone. We know there's going to be lots and lots and lots of changes, but I have to tell you, you could not be more proud of the team and the work that was done. We intend at this time to continue to listen to the guidance that we're given through MDE and Commissioner Richter as we move forward and adjust accordingly with what happens and what the requirements are. We also want to provide some opportunities yet for some further input from our families, from our students. Like we did with the referendum, we said, let's talk about these 3 models. Let's have some open houses where people can tell us what they think worked really well, and to adjust some of our models accordingly to meet the needs of our families. And so once again, we wanted to use the same kind of a model that we did with our referendum to be open and transparent to our community and to make decisions as we move forward during that time. So we spent a significant amount of time doing that. We feel like we're prepared once 4th of July holiday is over, that as changes come about, that we are going to meet again. We're going to get a lot of guidance the last week of July as to what the expectations are, but we know that we're going to be prepared to modify, to provide the professional development that our staff need to meet the needs that we have of these 3 pathways that we are required to be prepared to submit a plan. And we feel like we're leading the charge once again on what that might look like, and so we're excited about that. Yeah, please thank the team, because it was a wonderful experience once again where we could just really have great camaraderie, great conversation, challenge one another to think outside of the box, and to come out with great plans. And so I just trust me, that the work that the team has done is really incredible, and we feel like we're in great position as we move forward through the summer. Also at our training, we had some wonderful conversations based on the equity work that we talked about at the last board meeting. And I know Charles is going to work with me on this as well to pull together, once the 4th of July is over, we're going to pull together the task force that we talked about to start doing some of that work. But as an administrative team, we wanted to talk about what do we do well? Where have we grown? What strengths do we have? What concerns does the administrative team have? What do they think we need to be looking at and considering as we move forward? And so we have a lot of additional input to bring to that task force from district representatives, and we're excited about that. And then the third thing that we did on top of the training from Sourcewell is to talk about the continuous improvement process that will start August 11th and 12th. And that's where we'll be bringing in a lot of our team to start with the professional development moving forward into these 3 models and into the equity work that we have committed to this summer. So we're just really proud of the team, really proud of the work that we've done. And Sarah's going to take it over from here because it was unanimous agreement from elementary principals and the secondary principals as well to bring forward the recommendation that Sarah has today. But I thought I should give that background to help understand why she's coming and asking for more technology today. So with that, Sarah, any questions of me before we turn it over to her?
Great, thank you for that. The summary sounds like, we know we have an awesome team, so thanks to you and the team for putting that forward and then for setting the stage up for Sarah here.
Yeah, good, thank you. And I'd like to start out by thanking the board for having the foresight 5 years ago to look for a tech director that had an instructional background. Going to these meetings and going through what we are with distance learning right now, it has just been such a blessing for me to be involved with the instructional meetings and to be involved in these leadership meetings so we can come to you with the very best proposals from technology and instruction for what's best for our kids. So I thank you for that. So as Superintendent Larson said, a lot has changed. A lot has changed since March.
In 1 week.
Yeah, a lot has changed in 1 week. So we had one agenda item on here for you, and we'd like to bring a second agenda or a second proposal for your consideration based on those changes that have happened in the last week. So I'm going to talk you through both of these, okay? And again, I'm sorry about the short notice on this. It's been short notice for us as well. So. The proposal that was listed on the agenda was prior to the completion of the distance learning after action review. Mr. Murtha and Ms. Hahn did an amazing job during the leadership retreat and prior of really leading us through this after action review of distance learning. So we could see from a student perspective, a teacher perspective, a family perspective, how did distance learning go? And so we were able to take that information and really utilize that to develop some of these, the hybrid plan, the distance learning plan for next year, and then these recommendations. So this was actually prior to the completion of that in the leadership retreat that we had come up with a proposal to come to the board to ask for an additional 1,150 Acer Chromebooks for a cost not to exceed $335,000. Now, where that came from was clearly before we were even finished with distance learning, we realized that our teachers, of course, went above and beyond. And we should have known that, right? But went above and beyond with the rigor of distance learning. And a 1 to 2 did not, devices in elementary did not provide the amount of devices that were needed for the rigor that was happening in the homes with the education. So that was very evident before we even finished distance learning. We had some families request that when they were able to say, oh, we need extra devices. They were able to put in a help desk ticket. We did have some extra devices to support those families, but we do not have enough to support the amount of families if we were to make that an equitable opportunity across the board, okay?
Can I add one little thing to that we talked about during our conversations? And we talked a lot about what does attendance look like for a distance learning model and how do we take appropriate attendance. And we had great conversations about many times our parents are working during the day when our kids are at home, and the time that the parents can work with the children might not be during your typical school day times that the kids needed the technology. And what our principals had during the research that they had found is that even our elementary children were spending as much as 2 hours per night on their technology, doing their homework. And that wasn't even with any of their special classes necessarily, or science, and those were above and beyond. And so what we were finding is that if you had 2 children on a device, and they each needed, let's say, 2.5 hours a night to do their homework, 5 hours for a family when mom and dad are having dinner and then they're doing the work afterwards, it just didn't seem to work out perfectly for families. And that's some of the feedback that we got. And so that also adds to what she was saying about that it just didn't work out equitably for all of the learners to do the 1 to 2. But we tried it.
Correct, correct. And we also found that we were really banking on that families had other devices to use. And as we've talked about before, the students that had the access to our devices were more successful for many different reasons, logging in, having the correct programs, being able to troubleshoot, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, one of the things, of course, we have 3 kids, and one of the things we realized is we're one of those families that we have plenty of devices. So we actually said, well, we don't need that many devices. But fortunately, Lowell said, well, we really want you to have this device anyway. So, and I was sure glad we did got that second device, because even though we have plenty of household PCs and MacBook Pros and that sort of thing, they don't always interact well together with what the school district provides. And that's not a complaint, that's just a reality. So I definitely see the need for this.
Yeah, thank you. So with this proposal, the other piece of this, with both proposals and actually our N22 Chromebooks, if you remember, those were our very first Chromebooks that we put at Forest View. Those are end of life now. And so we are needing to get those out of the system. So this would, the 1,150 would do that. It would also complete the devices needed for our refresh cycle of our take-home program at Forest View 5 through 8. It's another thing that has come out of our distance learning is that we are seeing this need, and now that students have brought it home, been successful at having it at home, that we're ready to take that next step. So we were going to take the next step into a take-home program at the end of this coming year. This just kind of fast-forwarded that for us and provided us the needed time for the professional development and that sort of thing. Then it also completes the device needed for the one-to-one in grades 3 and 4 when we're not in distance learning. So that's the key here, is that it would not, with this first proposal, this was not for distance learning one-to-one. This was for, if we were in class, we would have enough devices for 3rd and 4th grade then to have in-class one-to-one, okay? The current N23, we have about 1,000 N23 Chromebooks that we use at Forest View, and the way that the cycle is set up, it's pretty nice because we use the devices for the 4 years, which we know is a good lifespan of a Chromebook. But then what we can do for that 5th year is that then that's our replacement device if a student breaks their device. Oh, you got to turn it in to get fixed, but we don't want to stop the learning, so here's an older device. We don't want to give them another brand new device, you know, so we have these older devices that then we can give them while they're, so that it doesn't stop their learning and we're still utilizing those. So with the refresh cycle, that can continue all the way through, and you'll see that on the chart. Okay, so with this plan, this is what it looks like. And again, this is just with the 1,150 Chromebooks. So this was prior to us getting all of the information that we've gotten in the last couple weeks. So you can see that this plan has for 2nd, 1st in kindergarten, that when we are in class, that it continues with the 4 devices in each classroom, okay? And then, like I said, we are able to do the one-to-one in the 3rd and 4th grade classroom with this, okay? And I'll show you, you'll see the cost side by side at the end, but that just gives you an idea. The ones that we're proposing buying are the same ones that we purchased for distance learning, the Acer Chromebooks. We got a lot of great feedback on that from both the technical team and the families and students that used it. Okay. So this is what's developed out of the discussions and out of the new information. As I said when I came back before, Mr. Murtha and I have done a lot of research, and prior to distance learning, we were ready to say, you know what, K1 and 2 devices just aren't the best in K1 and 2 for a typical in-class learning day. Distance learning has changed a lot of things, and that is one thing that's changed. We've really found that one of the things that was the most difficult for our district during distance learning was our K1 and 2 programs, because they had zero exposure to technology before that. The students, the families, in a school-based setting, you know, obviously they have their phones and things like that, but they didn't have experience with how do I use this to learn on and to submit things and interact with my teachers and things like that. And now that we're hearing that we need to be prepared to float between all of these at any given time, we really know that we need them to have that exposure to that with our teachers too, not just when we send them home in one of these situations. So now we're kind of looking at it in this whole new way of what can we do in K1 and 2 to support that growth of using these devices in that professional learning capacity. So the proposal now, after that, the discussion, learning that, the after action review, the leadership retreat, like Superintendent Larson said, we did get full commitment from all principals that this is the direction that they firmly believe that we should be going as a one-to-one, so that their children, their students have this opportunity to be more comfortable with the devices both in the classroom and then any time that we need to transition into a distance learning experience. So on top of the 1,150 Chromebooks that we were proposing before, our proposal is 1,000 Acer Chromebook tablets. So Chromebook tablets, we are suggesting that based on the objectives that are needed in kindergarten and first grade. They're not necessarily typing out papers, right? They're taking pictures and they're doing interactive learning with touch screen and such. And so that's why we look at the tablet for the kindergarten and first grade. Now we're moving more toward the Chrome for many reasons. Cost is one, but then also it's easier for our team to manage, and it has a really nice transition then into the rest of the grade levels because we're a Chromebook all the way through. So second grade would then, they already have had 4 300E Chromebooks in each classroom. They already have had some experience with that. They would continue with those devices, but be one-to-one then with those devices. So again, we'd be able to recycle the N22s. The N23s would continue to, we'd use those as the checkout. When something is broken, that would be our replacement device for those. With the distance learning, without purchasing the Chromebook tablets, our N23s would have had to be ready to be fill in the K4 families that needed extra devices. The N23s are not touch though either. And so that's why this is really a better option for our K4 families to have that tablet option for our K1, K and 1. We would still, it would put toward our refresh cycle for our take-home program in 5-8. Device needs for one-to-one in grades K4. Nice thing about it is we actually don't need to buy any extra carts to make this happen, because now that we've transitioned 5-8 into the take-home one-to-one, we have all our carts that we've been using at Forest View that now we can transition into the elementary program. So that's nice. And then, like I said, this provides that equitable access for all of our families to have that one-to-one device in their homes during distance learning. So then this is what this plan would look like. It's really hard to see on, I suppose it's better on the screen, but you can see the yellow squares. That's where we propose the refresh. What we're trying to do is make our refresh on a very clean plan that you can see that the cost stays the same throughout the years for our refresh. If we stagger, there's another plan where we can stagger and the cost just goes all over the board. It's very difficult to budget for year after year. This plan would...
When Marcy and I met with Sarah, we said that it would be a whole lot easier for us to budget as we move forward if we had a consistent amount, and that's why she's proposing that today.
Correct. And you can see that this refresh proposal actually puts new devices into our incoming fifth graders' hands, and then our incoming ninth grader hands. So every incoming fifth grader would get a new device, every incoming ninth grader would get a new device. Fourth, third, second, first, and kindergarten look a little bit different because those will stay in the classroom, like we said, unless we're distance learning. And then you can see that the costs stay fairly the same. We just have a little bit of an increase this year as we make the transition with the 569, which I'll show you. So this is the two proposals next to each other. The nice thing about right now is we had talked to you about in the spring that there was possible funding coming, and we had talked about, we're not comfortable with possible funding and guaranteeing that. We now have the funding through the CARES Act. And so, and that funding is specifically for technology and broadband and some of those pieces that we've needed help with to make this happen. These will be purchased through CDW, which is part of our Sourcewell contract. Now, I like CDW for that reason, because it's already on the Sourcewell contract. Therefore, we get the 1% rebate on all of our purchases with them. But also, CDW was the one who really came through for us in the spring. When we were really tight, we were one of the only districts to be able to get devices as quickly as we did into our kids' hands during a crisis situation. And they were huge in helping us with that. So the reason that we're bringing the second proposal to you today instead of waiting until the 13th, with COVID-19, it's really put a time crunch on all technology and the deliveries. And so for us to be prepared to hand these devices out to students before school starts in September, we would need approval and order of these devices today. Now, if we have to, if you would like to take the couple weeks to think about the second proposal, since it is a new proposal for you, that is just fine. We just may not have them ready to be in the hands. It'll depend on the delivery times. That those tablets may not be ready for our kindergarten and first grade at the start of school. So, questions?
Okay. Questions for Sarah?
Part of the question, or part of my experience as a parent, that I'll admit, up until COVID, I thought I was pretty savvy when it came to technology, but that taught me differently. But is there thoughts as to the training of the parents or the adult at home, or any type of video even?
Yep. It's a great question, Director Blacklands. Thank you. That actually came up in our after-action review based on our surveys and then what we experienced as well. We were so happy with the help desk, and we talked about that at the last meeting. That was huge. We had lots of families come through our help desk, and we felt like we were able to give very good support at that time. But there is a need for additional training. We are throwing around a couple different ideas. I would like to bring that as part of the community discussions that Superintendent Larson had been talking about to find out what would be the best format for parents to have that. We know that we can always record things and put it out there, but is that going to be what parents are needing, or should we do some kind of town hall? There's just lots of different options for that. The other nice thing is that we have community entities that are wanting to help us with that as well, and wanting to help provide trainings and spaces and all of that. So that is something that we will be doing more. The other piece of that is we also talked again about the need that we're all on the same platform. And I think that became very obvious during distance learning, that we can't have a couple of grade levels or even teachers on Seesaw and the rest on Classroom or something like that. That it's very important that everyone's on the same platform so that families can really navigate that and understand what's going on as well. So we're going to continue that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I wish I had more specifics, but we are working on it.
Yeah, no, that's, I'm very supportive about the plans, but that'd be my biggest concern.
Mm-hmm.
My question is a financial one. We have this CARES money, which is about, what, $800,000?
$900,000, yeah.
And what else can we use it for? Because we're using most of it then. We're using all but $300,000.
We really are thinking right now that we want to use the CARES Act money for technology. After all the conversations that we had this week, we think that that's probably the best use. You can also use it for summer programming, some of those kinds of things, but right now it seems like they're holding their own, or we can help with those as a school district level. And so we just, primarily, we're supposed to use this money for technology and for internet accessibility and so on.
So there's quite a lot of limits on what we can use that $900,000.
Yes.
Like, for one of the concerns I know you have is on busing, and if we needed additional smaller buses or whatever, could you use it for that kind of stuff? I'm just concerned that we're committing I think this is a great idea, but we're committing 2/3 of all the CARES money, and I just want to make sure
Right.
we're not gonna have all these other needs in the coming months.
I can tell you that our biggest concern about a hybrid model right now is transportation. We've got it figured out how to make a hybrid model work in a number of different scenarios. But it's going to be, how do we keep our children social distanced on the bus? So what it's saying is you can have one child per seat, it's gotta be every other seat, and they've gotta be staggered. So in a lot of respects, you can have about 25% as many children as we've been able to have on a bus in the past. We don't know what that looks like, and that's what's going to drive our hybrid model. We are afraid of what the costs are going to be for transportation, but right now, we don't see that you can use the CARES money for transportation.
And what about retrofitting classrooms with plastic screens and cleaning supplies and all that? Can you use CARES money for that? I just, it's kind of, I think this is a great idea, but using 2/3 of our CARES money right now without knowing what else we can use it for and without knowing what scenario we're gonna be under, that's my concern.
Some of the guidance that we got in our little 100-page booklet is that, literally, it is over 100 pages, but, is that in a hybrid model, you have to have a social distancing, the 6 feet in between, so that determines how many kids you can have in a classroom, and you can only have 50% capacity of your facility. And so what that means is you take the square footage of the entire facility, including your cafeterias, your gymnasiums, and so on, to distribute children throughout your facility. And so you just can't have as many in each classroom. I have to tell you that our elementary team literally has every one of their buildings figured out on how they can have their children back into the buildings and distribute it out to meet the needs that are in those buildings in a hybrid model. Our biggest concern, again, is how are we going to get people there? What is transportation going to look like? And one of the things that I was going to talk about later, but I'm going to bring it up right now, is right now we have one meeting scheduled for July for the board. When they come with the final decision on what they want school to look like as we start, we may ask the Board of Education to have a special meeting because we might need some additional guidance moving forward. Transportation is going to be, to me, our biggest challenge because we've got scenarios figured out on how we can make it work, how we can keep our kids safe, our staff safe, and so on.
So the hybrid model would be bringing all of the kids to school still?
But not necessarily every day.
Oh, okay.
So they could be distance learning one day and
Okay.
so, but how do we make, you can't believe the work we've done. We have had
It's
some really
exciting.
creative problem solving going on. But like I said, we feel really confident that we're in a good place. But neither the distance learning model nor the hybrid model can work if each child doesn't have a device in their hands.
And if I can add as well that the CARES Act, I went to some webinars on it. It specifically is for, like we said, technology, broadband, summer school. Those were really the three big things that
There's
it.
not much else we can use it for.
It was pretty strict, and I mean there was a lot of wiggle room within those things, which was nice of how we could use it, but not. But it is about those.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, I've got a few
Yeah.
questions if
Yes.
I can. Do we have on our devices that are out the ability to monitor the utilization of them?
Yes, another good question. So that's kind of a hot button topic. We have the ability on the device itself to see what was happening. So if there is a complaint and a parent says, I need to know what my kids are doing, or a teacher says that they need to know what their kids are doing, kids cannot erase their history on their devices. So we're able to go back and see what they're doing. We do not have a live monitoring system on there, such as GoGuardian right now. Now, there's done a lot of research on this, and there's 2 big camps on this. I think we've talked about it before as a group, but there's the camp that says that we should have it on there, and we should be monitoring everything that they do. But there's just as many people and families that say, we don't want that at night at home on our devices. And so it's really kind of both ways.
Well,
Where
my
I'm at,
question is just more related to, do we know how many hours or minutes a device is used within a 24-hour period?
yes,
And-
as long as we know how much they're logged into their device.
Okay, whether they're used or not, we don't know, but logged in is all.
Correct, and what we were able to do is run reports on Google Classroom specifically. So that's how we actually monitored attendance during distance learning, and we're really firming that up because there were some glitches in there. But we are able to see when they log into Google Classroom, how much time they've spent, and then when they log out again, so,
Can you log into the classroom and not do anything and leave it open for a while?
yes.
Okay, so we don't really have any idea how much a student is using a device.
We don't know, like you're pointing out, if they get in Google Classroom from our office, we are not able to see what was done. However, from a teacher perspective, they're able to see based on what was done within the classroom.
Okay, and then, do you have a sense, or maybe Marcy does, on what our annual spend is for curriculum books and on an annual basis?
I know that's ever evolving, and I would rather have Mr. Murtha or Ms. Laura talk toward that.
Okay.
Because I know it's changed significantly in the last year to 2 years even, so.
Okay, and then, as far as the internet service, do all students in our district have the coverage they need now?
Yeah, so that was something I was really proud of at Sourcewell here, because as technology directors, we were able to get together and meet during the leadership, and I got to brag it up a little bit, all the awesome things that our team has done here, and we ended up, at the end of distance learning, we only had 2 families that needed paper and pencil because they had 0 coverage in their home. And then as our principals and our staff were able to work with them, 6,500 students plus, we had 2 families that we weren't able to get connected. So whether that was through hotspots, working with CTC, working with Spectrum, CenturyLink, our team really individually met the needs of every single family in our district. So we ended up with, I believe it was 148 hotspots that went out for distance learning. And then most of those have come back. We have about 30 families that chose to continue paying on their own through the summer because otherwise they didn't have any other access. So they're paying for the hotspot over the summer. And then our summer school children, because we require distance learning, the district is paying for those. I think we have about 15 hotspots out with summer school families right now.
Okay, and then, so this would provide one-to-one for kindergarten and first grade, right?
Kindergarten through 12th grade, this plan will be.
Well, through 12th, but it includes
correct.
kindergarten and first grade.
Correct.
Is that, I would need to rely on our educators here, but it just seems like, does a 5 or 6-year-old really need a device to start learning what we need them to start learning? And I just,
Yep.
it seems like such a young age that we want to provide them with their own device.
Well,
Yeah.
it's also the vehicle of which the curriculum is pushed out to the student. So it isn't just giving Janie or Johnny a tablet or a device, but that's the vehicle between the school district and the students out in the.
Only if it's distance learning though, correct?
Or a hybrid.
Or a hybrid, but what if
And
it
that's-
isn't?
Yep, and that was my big thing. That's what I brought to the principals and superintendent. That was because that's what I pushed. I said, I need to have a good benefit to cost ratio here in what we're doing. And so there's a couple examples of this that we had come up with. Is because I said we don't just want this to be it's sitting in a rotation, where only 5 kids are on it and they're playing a game. for 10 minutes a day. Like we want this to be integrated. If we're gonna make this commitment, we really need it to be integrated into what we're doing, whether we're distance learning or not. So an example is, and Mr. Murtha again could talk more toward this, but we really struggle with our benchmark assessing. Takes a lot of time to do our benchmark assessing with our elementary kids right now, where they're reading, the teachers are listening, they're on the same books, things like that. There's an online version of this benchmark assessment that could be much, much more efficient for us to use in many different ways. So if our students are used to using that on their tablets, maybe that is one of theirs. While I'm working with this group on their reading, this group is actually on their tablets working on the benchmark program. Now they already have that experience, whether we're in class, we're out of class, whether it's I'm assessing that way or I'm assessing face-to-face. That's only one example. We have many, many examples of how we can start to integrate this into the classroom. I do want to reiterate, if you would have asked me before distance learning, I wasn't sold on the one-to-one on K1, but I think that everything in our world has shifted since March. And from what we're hearing from all levels right now is to be prepared really to be fluid between anything. And in order to do that, our kids need to have access to this. We did talk about what paper and pencil would look like if we had to send home, like send buses out with paper and pencil to our K1, our principals, across the board, so that just isn't as effective as having the device and being able to connect with our kids, no matter if it's distance learning or not. And then also, we're moving away from paper anyway in our classrooms in K1. And so they aren't just sitting and doing worksheets anymore anyway. So they really didn't feel like that would be authentic learning.
Okay, then my last question is, you know that I support technology, but I support because of a return. So I look at this saying, we're gonna spend $500,000 every year. So how are we going to capture a savings of $500,000 plus every year? Where can we gain from efficiencies by this kind of an investment every year? I very much support technologies, but for every dollar we spend, I'd like to see us save $1.10 or something.
So
And you don't have to answer that right now, but I would like to see some hard numbers.
Sure.
That here's where we anticipate. I mean, if we're going to ask parents to spend 5 hours every evening and now 2.5 because we're going to do 1-to-1, there's got to be some labor costs within our staff. There's got to be a lot of other things then if we're asking our parents to pick up a lot of the pieces and just efficiencies with their staff, our teachers, et cetera, that, in our business, when we spend $1, we're going to get that plus something in return. And I would think this would be somewhat the same, and that's why I've always been a proponent of getting away from the paper, although I've not seen yet that a movement of getting reduction of paper and books and those kind of things. But it would be nice to get some hard numbers back, some goals and benchmarks that says, here's where we see savings to offset this technology investment, which I fully support, but would like to see what the return is going to be.
And I hope we don't get rid of paper in elementary. I don't want worksheets, but I want paper. Draw and write and color and use.
And that's a little, Mike, that's why I don't know if that's proper or not. We'll rely on our those that are much smarter than myself from an educational standpoint. To me, it seems young, but what's our return is all.
I think when we get the algebra presentation where they're not buying any curriculum, it's all open resource. That right there is an example
Yeah,
of savings.
yeah.
And that's what you're looking for.
Yep, that's exactly what, and in other areas, my assumption is we can easily find that for every dollar we spend, we can save 2. I think it's out there and it's available, and we improve the quality of our teaching, we improve the lives of our staff because of efficiency gains, et cetera.
And I think at the K1 level, it's going to be seen later on, because we're not going to get away from coloring and writing and the movements of those types of things.
Yeah, but this $500,000 investment is K through 12 on an
Correct.
annual basis, so.
Correct.
I do believe that the achievement gap, when you look through that lens, this type of investment is gonna benefit us as a school district.
Yeah.
Gonna benefit those students that are that are losing the achievement gap, but also just by indoctrinating on some sort, on some level, a kindergarten and a first grader is gonna make that more intuitive for them, allow them that curriculum when they move into second and third grade. Whereas, like what Sarah said, later on, we're gonna see a lot of that benefit. But I think that it's important to provide that investment at that kindergarten and first grade age. But also, to provide that equalizer of sorts when it comes through the lens of the achievement gap. Basically, what I mean by that is I agree with you, Ruth. Paper and pencil is something pretty awesome to have, and it's a value. But there's other pieces. I get to say that. Catherine and I get to say we want that, but we also have the resources to kick it in the butt or to provide our children these type of resources. Our children have had iPads since they're probably 4 or 5 years old, or some sort of device. But a lot of people aren't going to have that accessibility. So if we're able to be able to tie this to curriculum towards the benefit of our students, plus invest in terms of the fight on the achievement gap, I see a lot of benefit. But so
Yeah,
it's important.
And I thank you, Director Blacklands. I totally agree. My concern with the longer we go with distance learning, the greater that gap's going to be, because your children are blessed to have parents that are going to work and support and make sure they do their assignments and log in. What I heard from a number of different teachers is those students that struggled in class are the same ones that struggled in distance learning because they wouldn't even log in. And so if the parents aren't there to help support, my fear is the longer we go, the greater the gap it's going to create. But but in some ways maybe it'll help too. And anything we can do to help with that, with those that otherwise wouldn't have access to it is certainly important. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, comments on this?
So before you tonight.
It's getting there.
It is, it's getting there.
Keep this up.
This late afternoon, soon to be night, yeah. What is in the agenda right now is the proposal for the one-to-one Forest View and the revised refresh cycle that she talked about that we've been preparing for all along. And that basically is proposal 1. Proposal 2, though, is it's kind of up to the Board of Education if you want to amend this action item to incorporate the kindergarten through first grade piece, which is an additional $234,000. Again, that would be funded through the CARES Act for this year, for a total of $569,000. The other thing is, if you want, we could accept proposal 1 and bring the K-1 piece back to the board meeting on July 13th for, so you can think about it and have further discussion. The only problem that we have with that is that Sarah did check in today, and they can't promise us that we will have our devices because everybody's doing this right now. And so we know that if we order, I'm just going to say proposal 1, that $335,000 worth today, they promised us that we would have it in August so that we could get ready for the school year. And we know that if we did proposal 2 today, we could have all of that in time for school. We can't be assured on July 13th that we can get the K-1. And again, we'll find out the last week of July if we have to start with distance learning or if we have a hybrid or if the kids start full-time. And that's just kind of out of our hands right now at this time. So we just wanted to bring forth both proposals, asking to accept at least proposal 1, but if you're if you feel comfortable making an amendment, that you have that opportunity to do that with proposal 2.
So Tom, do we put that in the motion? Do we read if I were to make a motion,
The total, I think, is 599,000, because it was 264 for the, so you
Isn't it 234?
in here it says 264.
Let me just do a check real quick.
That's
on that,
changed
please.
then since our meeting this morning, but that's,
but Tom, do we just add that to the motion, to what's here then?
If you want to include
is that-
the full proposal
It's
too, that
264.
can just be your motion of the full 569 or 595, whatever that number is.
it's 599 then. Did it go up that 30,000?
I'm just looking at, shouldn't have changed, but I might have just had a misprint.
That says not to exceed, so.
So it would be.
234, so it was my misprint on the other page.
So it is
234.
30,000 times.
Yeah, just like that.
Sound like my wife.
Yep. Sorry about that.
That's what, things like me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making money. Sorry.
Sorry.
So it'd be 569 for
Correct.
proposal 2.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I move to approve proposal 2 for the purchase of additional Chromebooks, including K through 1, at the amount of $569,000.
And tablets, and I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Director Blackline, second by Director Nelson for approval not to exceed 569,000 of the devices. Any further discussion? I did have another question. The CARES Act piece doesn't enter to my mind at all because that's a one-time deal. I'm looking beyond that. Is it, it's, the math isn't adding up to me. It's 234,000 to get one-to-one devices for K through 1?
So 234,000 will be the tablets for K1.
That's
And
spread
so-
over multiple years.
Yep, and so you have to look at the refresh cycle, because what we do is we take devices and we recycle them
Yeah,
to
no,
other
I understand
students.
that, but just purely if we look at K1, it's 234,000 to buy enough for everyone today, right?
Correct, for
So
kindergarten,
every
first
4
grade.
years, if that's all we refresh, it's 234,000. Every 4 years.
For the
K-
tablets. So the tablets are less expensive than the Chromebooks. So the Chromebooks, a 1 grade level approximately is 167,500. So just K1 is that cost of 234,000 for 2 grade levels. Does that make
So
sense?
we're refreshing of the Chromebooks 2 grade levels, basically.
Correct.
I don't know if I followed. So once we have enough of whatever the devices are for all grades, is our refresh every year $500,000, or is that going to be more?
Nope, the refresh is 500,000 because we're doing the 3 grade levels at a time every single year after that. And we're buying outright, which was the conversation that we
Okay,
had
all right.
the last.
And then, how will that impact, so we've had discussion about our current paraprofessionals in kindergarten. And those funds obviously come out of our general fund, but as well as our devices come out of our general fund?
Or capital. It can come out of operating capital as well.
I'm trying to understand if if this impacts financially our paraprofessional staff in kindergarten. Because there's been some discussion about having all special ed and then not having those pairs due to budget reasons. And I'd hate to see us replace staff for a device for,
Well, the plan that we have in place right now does not do that because even part of this purchase right now, the computers that we purchased in March to finish out the school year, that was taken out of operating capital, which is a different fund. So it's not the same as where staff is taken out of. Now, if in the future, this $500,000 per year, if they decide to take that out of the general fund and not out of operating capital or whatever, it could impact, it could impact staffing, it could impact anything in the general fund if that's how it's done. But like you said, if you can find $500,000 in savings each year because you have the technology, let's say some of it's in curriculum, then maybe some of those funds could be decreased to be put towards the technology. It's really how each year, how the different budget analysis goes.
I understand that. So I'm just looking strictly again at the K-1 and investing these kind of dollars for technologies to do one-to-one. And then if we don't need those devices, let's say, or as many because class is in session, it's going to happen at some point in time. And we've removed our kindergartner, paraprofessionals. That would be a concern of mine.
Well, and we're just really approving this for this year. We don't have to continue to buy tablets if we decide we
Well,
don't.
but
3 years down the road.
that's what I'm trying to get across. I don't think that's right. You do that this year, and then in 4 years, we know we have to replace them, or we discontinue because of budget reasons or whatever it might be. I understand that, but once you start with something, it's hard to pull that back in, too.
May I show real quick? This is if we don't do the K-1, you can see that it's a savings for 2 years, but then because of the refresh of the upper grades anyways, it ends up evening out on cost due to the cycle of the devices.
I'd like to add one thing too, because we had a lot of conversation about this with the elementary team the last 3 days. And every principal was on board about that. We have been working for years to transition how we teaching to accommodate the technologies that our children are growing up with. Unfortunately, in March, we were forced to make that change within 8 days. And our principals say right now that this is something that we've been working years to do, and we did it in a short period of time, and our teachers proved that they could do it. Every one of the principals said, whether it's this year with COVID or a year from now when we hopefully don't have to deal with it, it still is best practice to be teaching our children to use technology in their education because they're growing up with technology. Many of the toys that babies get have technology in them just from birth on. They're growing up in a different world than I grew up or my children grew up even when I had my kids. And so our principals in their conversation are committed that they're not going back to the way it was, that they're going to continue to enhance this learning through this process. And as Tim Murtha talked about at his curriculum conversations at a couple of different meetings, is that most textbooks even now, right now, have that online element in them, that now we can actually use the online element rather than the hardcover book, that will be updated year to year rather than every 6 years, your book is so outdated you have to buy a new book. So.
Yeah, my question, though, to the principals and the teachers is, given a choice, do you want to spend money on devices for students, for for K-1? Or do you want to have paraprofessionals, EAs at that level? What, if you pick, if you only can pick one, which would it be? And that's what I'm just trying to get some clarity to.
And the reason I'm in support of this proposal right now is, and I know you don't want to think about the CARE funds, but right now we have this possibility of distance learning, and we have to be prepared for it, and this is how we prepare for it best. And we can use those CARE funds to cover these costs, and it seems like it's the best use of those CARE funds. And when that goes away, if that's not, I can see in K-1, I don't know if we really need one-to-one devices. And I'm old, so maybe that's why I feel that way, but I want kindergartners to be using manipulatives and playing and all that kind of stuff. And so, but for right now, we need it to do best practice for the next year. And we've been given funds so we can provide that for them. And so maybe next year we decide we don't want to continue with tablets. We have them, but maybe we only need 1 to 4 to provide the technology learning. But
Or at least the refresh cycle, you choose not to, or you have one classroom per grade level or something. And that's a choice that you can make 2 years from now when.
But right now, we don't know what's going to happen in September.
Right now, we've just been told we are required to have 3 plans in place. And they had this meeting last week so we could do some pre-thinking before the announcement is made the last week in July.
Okay, so any other questions, comments? If not, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Next up will be Marcy is going to walk us through preliminary budget.
I think we should have walk-up music when you all come to those.
I just sent Andrea an email. And asked her if she was watching on YouTube to.
Hey, Marcy.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
In your packets, there is a budget document, and I'm just going to briefly go over that. It's a lot more detailed in the packet, but on page 2, I wanted to note that the free and reduced went from 40.59 to 40.05 this year, so it was down about 0.54%, and you'll see that that kind of plays into the compensatory for next year. And then the document walks through the budget process. As you know, we approve it in June, and then there's a levy that we certify in September. In December, we'll look at the revised budget. Starting on page 4, we compare data from 2018-19, that's most recent data from the state, to the state averages. And just want to note on there that we receive less federal and more from the state than the state averages. District level admin is 3% and the state is 4.8%. Also wanted to note that. And then on page 6, the 2018-19, that summary is end of the year. So how we ended the year for that year. Then on page 7, we have the revised budget from this year. And as you know, that's our starting point. So we take that and we roll it forward to next year and look at all of our assumptions. We did start with an unassigned deficit of $729,897. And then let's look at our assumptions. So for revenue assumptions, we had a 2% increase in general education aid, decrease in enrollment of 72.5 adjusted pupil units, 6.7% increase in special ed reimbursement. And that reimbursement, the big change was because they are, if you recall, a couple years ago, they changed the SPED formula, and they are phasing out the cap, and the cross subsidy has now started, those chains are now in there. So we're starting to see that increase, and it's, for this year, it was $1 million, that's 6.7%, so that was nice. Compensatory revenue, as I said, it's based on free and reduced, so that did go down 7.3%. And the CARES Act is in there as well. I gave that update at the last board meeting. There is I put in 600,000 because we met and kind of discussed, should we use the Chromebook purchase from March, should we not? So for right now, it's 600,000, and we can always look at revising the budget in December when we get that plan finalized. enrollment projections. So as you know, a big part of our revenue is based on the student counts. The projection model accounts for birth, transition rates between grades, and fall enrollment versus the end of the year ADM. So this is the enrollment projection model, plus, as you know, we did take out 2 per grade level based just because of COVID. We don't know what that actually is gonna mean, but we did take out 26 additional from the enrollment projection for next year.
Say, Marcy, on that enrollment,
Yeah.
is it kind of the same formulas that, I mean, this just really is opposite of what the demographic study that we had done a few years ago. This showed the community shrinking.
I was actually thinking at the next board meeting, since I won't have a financial report, I was gonna do a graph of how the report showed, the Reinhardt, I believe is the name, versus how we've been tracking, so you guys could see the
Okay.
differences.
That would be good.
Yeah. So we were at 6,492, or down, as I said, 72.5 students. And it's 1.14%.
And what did you say you took out an additional,
2 per grade level, so 26 students.
so if we hadn't done that, so that, you're basing that based on what's been happening
Yes.
with distance learning?
Just because we don't know how many will come back in the fall. And as you know, these projection models too, I mean, this is a model. It doesn't mean this is what's gonna happen.
But we'd still be down even.
Yes. And then the expense assumptions, so we have our Hildy actuarial report done every 2 years. That draw that we can do for the implicit subsidy is going down, so we do have a reduction in that. We do have an increase in the transportation contract, and there's an increase in the labor agreements along with the benefits. The net reduction in staffing is approximately 28.53 FTE. We did talk about that at the May meeting, kind of went through that summary of what we're going through. There's been really no major changes with that. The only thing is there has been a couple of positions that we said we were going to hold on that we are going to add, and that is in this budget. For example, the high school social studies position is now going to be not held.
Special ed leads.
Yes, yep, at Baxter and Riverside. The known replacement savings, that's in the budget. And then we also did have coding transportation vehicles to capital and the PAC technician. And that was just based on that estimate that Corey had presented. As you know, that was a presentation, it could change, so it's an estimate for right now. The preliminary budget starts on page 8 for 2021, and the unassigned projected is $182,625. I really, zone in on the general fund because that's the one that we are, the unassigned that we really focus on. We have a policy for. And the only thing I wanted to note is I do know that when you look at the total deficit for the general fund, it's 1.5 million. That may seem a little alarming, but a large portion of that, the 1 million, is from long-term facilities maintenance revenue, which we set aside for Blueprint 181. So it's related to the projects. It's not, please don't feel like that's an alarming number that we're deficit spending 1.5, because that's in those restricted categories. Other funds, so interest was adjusted in all funds, as you guys know, with all the changes. Interest has really went down substantially, so I did revise those. In the food service fund, in July, we'll be determining if we're gonna change meal prices or not. There's still a question mark there because Alyssa has not heard if state and federal reimbursements will be changed. So Fund 2 basically was the same revenues as this year for now, just because we didn't know, and the expenses were adjusted based on labor agreements. The Fund 4 budget was updated with projections that Corey had put together based on what she thinks is going to happen next year with her programs. The construction fund budget was updated with the most recent interest projections from Ellers, and then the cash draw schedule from ICS. The debt service fund is, the amounts are reflective of what we've levied for payments and then also the current debt payments. And then the Fund 45 was updated with the implicit subsidy draw, as I had noted earlier. And then the unassigned fund balance, so on page 10, I just wanted to note that, we're always talking about fund balance and what that means for our district. MDE does a calculation where they take the unassigned plus the assigned fund balance, non-spendable and restricted, and divide it by the expenses in only those categories. So it does look higher than the way the district calculates it. So the district's policy is to take the unassigned divided by the general fund expenses total. So on that page, you'll see that MDE's calc is 9.96, whereas the district's policy calc is 7.4. Our policy is that 5 to 7 range, so we are within it, but the state does recommend 3 months. I know you've heard me say this over and over. I'd like to bring that policy back. That's on my to-do list. And 2021 projected balance is at that 6.6 million, which is less than 1 month of operating.
Less than 1 month.
Yeah. So we'd like to start building that back up, and go from there. You guys have any questions on that?
Marcy, when you do bring that back, what is the reason, maybe you can't answer this, but why do we have the district's calculation versus MDE's calculation? Has that been around for years here, or?
I think the main reason why it's been in there is because the MDE's calculation is public. I mean, that, somebody can go out on MDE's website and pull that. And so then when I give an update to the board and say we're at 7.4%, it contradicts what's out on MDE. So I want to make that clear that there are two calculations.
But I guess my point is, why don't we just calculate it the way MDE does, so that we're consistent?
Because unassigned is really your rainy day funds, whereas all those other categories assigned, that's Q-Comp. You can't, where there's a Q-Comp plan, it's not something we can access. The non-spendable fund balance, it's your prepaids. So last year we had that much in prepaids, and we're gonna spend it. It's gonna be accounted for in this year, so it's already spent. You can't count it, I wouldn't count it as something we could spend. And then the other category is the restricted, same thing. It's not something that we can use. Say you guys said, let's go and buy those Chromebooks that Sarah it's not something we can access. And there is one thing I should talk about, and I haven't talked to Lane about it, but there is an action the board can take to commit funds. So we have unassigned, but there is a committed fund balance, and it takes board action to do that. So by June 30th, at the end of the year, the board would need to take action and say, we want to set aside X amount for whatever you decide, and then that's set aside in that separate fund balance. So I don't think that you have done that here before, but it is something that's out there. Yeah.
And that's June 30th?
Yes. Yes.
And we're really hopeful that this past school year, that we're going to come in better than, the projected deficit that she's got in here. We, like we shared a month ago, we decided just to keep the number that we projected prior to COVID, because there were so many ups and downs that we just don't know. So we're actually cautiously optimistic that it's going to be quite a bit better than this, at least for this past year. But again, we don't want to get overzealous with that, because we know that transportation could be something that is a big money situation this coming year, so we'll see.
Do we have any early
We've got some
indication?
ideas about that too, so.
Do we have any early indication at all about our kindergarten class sizes or anything? Is it too early?
456 today, I think. Isn't that what they said?
Yep, I looked at the document, 450, I think it was 454.
454, if all the children.
In our projection, and it goes up quite a bit still, right?
Yep.
449.
Is the projection?
So we're very close.
So 5 kids. Yeah, so hopefully they all come.
Yes.
That's good news.
Nice work.
Thanks.
Yes.
Any questions for Marcy's?
I so move approval of the 2021 preliminary budget as presented.
Second.
Motion by Director Campbell, second by Director Kern for the approval of the preliminary budget of 2021. Any further discussion? Marcia, you probably said, but when will you bring the final budget?
That's this. So this is the final budget.
Projected budget, but then we'll revise it again in December, probably January.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
By that time, we'll have the audit results and we'll have a lot better.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. You know, just a comment, I just have concern about $1.5 million deficit spending when we already have such a low general fund balance.
The majority of that, though, is almost $1 million of that is LTFM, and that's for the Blueprint 181 plans. So in our plans, we had allocated $1.2 million every year to go to the facilities plans. In those first 2 years, we were actually under that. We didn't use all of it, and it went into the reserve. And now this year, the cash draw schedule had like $2.6 million for the projects. So it does look like it's concerning, but it really, we're catching up from what we had scheduled previously.
I will add too that, you know, we did the budget twice this year because of COVID, but this is the first year, at least since I've been here, that when we actually did our projections and our assumptions and everything, we took it all the way to zero. And so we did, in our planning, we were really cognizant of that because there are so many unknowns. And otherwise, many years we'd say, well, we always know that the budget's going to end up better because we budget conservatively. Well, we're still budgeting conservatively, and we still brought it to zero. So I think that Marcy and I are feeling really good about the budget that we're bringing forth to you today.
Should that be a line item in here then, maybe, Marcy, that 1.2 of that piece on here?
It is on the fund balance summary sheet. It is line,
I guess I'm looking at the Fund 1,
yeah.
so it's in there.
So if you look, you know how there's individual lines? If you look at line, go up 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom, that's LTFM. So each line is the restricted fund balances we have.
Okay, the long-term facilities, you're
Yes.
saying, okay, all right, I see it now,
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah. And if you keep going up, the next deficit that adds to that is staff development. And again, that's controlled by the
Yep.
staff
Yeah,
development
but,
committee.
okay, that's, okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions, comments from anyone? If not, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Marcy.
Yes.
Next up is the BHS Trade Home sale.
So I'll just hit repeat from the last one. As you know, we did get a cancellation, but Brad Watson came and he found another buyer, which is awesome. So this is pretty much the exact same sale agreement that we had presented last time. And so it's a sale of $58,500, $3,000 earnest money. And if you do approve that, I also have a cancellation agreement that I can sign for the previous owner. He did present 2 options, returning the earnest money and then keeping it. And he recommended that we return it because technically we could not move into a new purchase agreement until that previous one is canceled. And so we could present it, but if they don't sign it, then we can't sell it. So if approving this, then I will sign that cancellation agreement.
Okay,
I
good.
do have one question on this.
Mhm.
Somewhere, and I can't find it now, I thought it said that the property wouldn't be moved until quite a bit later.
Yes, October 16th, and I found out that with all the construction happening, the trades home is actually not gonna be built next year. So it will not, so it's okay that
Okay,
it's going
that was
that
my
late.
question.
Yeah.
Gonna be built next year?
So we don't have that
Right.
class? Or are they doing something different, or do you know?
I have not heard from Brian. It was an update from, I actually heard it from Brad. He said, I know that's normally the rush is to get it off-site, but there is no rush this year with the construction happening.
So could we get an update on what's happening in place of that?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's a bummer.
I would so move to approve the sale agreement for the VHS trade homes for $58,500 with $3,000 for earnest money as presented.
Second.
thank you. Motion by Director Kern, second by Director Nelson for approval of the BHS Trade Homes sale of 58.5. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Marcy. Next up is a presentation, Corey Reynolds with Baxter Park and Rec Program.
Good afternoon. I left the proposed budget on the yellow sheet in front of you, just because I do have it up here on the screen, but it may be hard to see that way. So, as we all know, this is a rapidly and ever-changing situation. So what I told the Baxter City Council on last Tuesday is now, of course, not obsolete, it's just already changed. The good thing was we had embedded in what I presented to them the scenario that we find ourselves in now, which is that games are allowed to be played in youth sports. So the guidelines that the Department of Health has issued for youth sports programs this summer really presented logistical barriers that we didn't feel that we could reasonably overcome in Baxter Park and Rec, especially without the ability to play games. Games that prohibition was lifted just yesterday. Unfortunately, that is too late for us to plan a league season like we would normally do. Our staff has been laid off, no prep work has been done. We do have kids signed up, but we would recommend at this point to cancel the summer program as scheduled and advertised. However, and this is the good news, however, now that we can play games again, we want to offer some kind of ball program for the children in our community, and I think that probably you all would agree with that as well. Nobody wants to not offer something to kids this summer. So we feel like we have an opportunity to do that. And so what we're looking at is offering something we're loosely calling a dollar ball program. It's sort of like the pickup games of maybe some of our childhoods, where kids just come to the park and they play games a few times a week. We're working to have volunteer coaches on site to provide short, very basic skills instruction as needed, and to oversee the games and make sure that the safety precautions are being followed. As soon as we have the details, and we would probably spend the next week developing those details, we would advertise the program with the goal of starting it the week of July 6th. It's because it's a much less structured, more informal, but still really fun program. It doesn't take quite the setup that it would otherwise. So,
Lori, is the city of Baxter, are they willing to let us use their baseball diamonds and such in which to do that?
yes, that is correct. They have been doing maintenance on the fields. They've been mowing and something else. They haven't been lining, but we don't need that.
Okay.
So the fields right now are in a condition that we would be able to use. I should note also that the city council last Tuesday at their meeting, they adopted this budget. At that time, there was sort of two options, one with dollar ball and one without dollar ball. I'm only showing you dollar ball because now we know we can run it. So you'll see that budget includes that there. So really the only difference between not offering dollar ball and offering it is a little bit of payment for our coordinator to be able to set up all the details and oversee everything so we can be sure that those safety precautions are in place. We know, of course, this could all change, so we would look to the first budget revision that Marcy just spoke of to sort of catch up and revise our numbers. Should also mention that this budget is based on running a typical fall season for Baxter Park and Rec, and we know that is in no way a given at this point. We just knew we had to have both bodies adopt a budget to get started for the year. So, like everything, we're going into this with some unknowns, knowing it could change quickly, but we feel like we can at least offer something to kids in our community.
So, can I ask a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is our school district budget, and the contribution, is that what Baxter provides us?
Yes, that's correct.
So we don't know what that is for this?
No, we're still sort of waiting to see how the dust settles
Okay, and so
on,
they'll help contribute
on
some of
this-
this break even?
yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's also why the cumulative or the running total for the program is to be determined. Because we know we won't end up where we expected to when we built this budget, and we're just not sure exactly where it will be.
And this does not impact the travel ball? This is something, travel ball is still able to rent from us? that
Yes,
type of
correct.
thing?
Travel ball is always mostly separate from us. They use the same fields. There's probably some sharing of some equipment and things that would continue as it always does.
So why is their contribution less for the new budget than it was in past budgets?
Because we know that we will, what we're proposing to provide this summer is much
Oh,
less
'cause it
than they
starts July
typically.
1. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they did not get what they paid for April through June.
So Corey, are you kind of suggesting perhaps that we adopt this proposed 2021 budget to move forward with sports being it started July 1? Is that?
Yes. Also, according to our joint powers agreement with the city of Baxter for this programming, both bodies have to adopt a budget. So this would be fulfilling that requirement, but also giving us the green light to go ahead with an alternate program for summer.
Okay, so what you're looking for then is board approval of, if you will, canceling what currently is there and adopting this revised?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
I would like to, just because it was brought up with some confusion on the public input, this is just an input from Wade Hopajoki. Dear school board members, we are currently running practices with 120 to 140 kids, 9 through 18 in softball, baseball, and Brainerd. We're following guidelines given by MDH. We have all volunteer coaches. This is ran through some associations. Now that the governor has given the green light with guidelines, we need to put programs in place. All girls and boys should have the same opportunity. This means hundreds more girls and boys. There are communities such as Alex, Bemidji, Grand Rapids that are putting together 6-week programs for baseball and softball. The old saying, we can't duplicate our programs from what they look like, so we won't have them. That is unacceptable to our community. Nothing will ever look the same with sports from here on out. These are volunteer coaches league. We just need a place they can sign up, establish a cost, and organize through community education. School members, we owe it to our community to provide programs under guidelines. Anything else is unacceptable. If this is voted down, it isn't because of COVID issues. We're following guidelines. If it's voted down, then it's a budget issue. This will be unacceptable. Thank you, Wade. And I think from what I'm hearing, Corey, what you're proposing is exactly what this individual at least is suggesting, that we get a 6-week program or 8 or whatever that is, and we continue on. This is very broad, but.
Yeah, I believe he's involved and he's referring to some of the travel programs. And again, we don't
That's
do
not a part of
travel.
this,
We
correct.
don't, that is above and
Yep.
beyond and
Yeah.
not our lane.
Yeah.
Typically, we do offer a league in the summer that acts as something of a warm-up for those travel teams. what I'm proposing is that we are not going to offer those. We're going to offer something more informal, but it is a chance for kids to get out and play ball this summer.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel that we can do, because we haven't had staff since April. They've been laid off. There's no flip to switch to flip, to turn these programs on. It takes a number of weeks, and really we're starting way behind the starting line. If we were to put a league together today, we don't have umpires, we don't have coaches. All those people likely have other summer jobs at this point. The time and expense would be extremely prohibitive for us to do our typical program in the next 6 or 8 weeks that's left of summer. So I really feel like this is a viable opportunity, an alternative.
Charles, yeah.
I feel it's, well, Corey, you and I visited beforehand, so this probably isn't anything new to you. But I do feel it's important that we try to provide something to our students. Selfishly for my son Chaitan to be able to take part in, or my daughters. Though it's not like what Wade had said, though it's not like what it used to be. The dollar ball is something that will give them the opportunity to get together and play and have some loose supervision to that, which I appreciate. The other piece that I was confused at moving in was the role of the travel ball with this, and so I think I have a more firm understanding that that's separate. They can continue to practice. They'll rent from us facilities if need be, or
In the city, they're working with the city. on that.
So from what I'm understanding is that the non-traveler association ball will look much different, but there still will be an opportunity for young people to gather and play.
Yes, correct.
So how soon would we have that dollar ball information out there and advertise for that if we can get that rolling?
Our goal would be next week,
Next week? Oh,
that it would start appearing with the hopes to start the week of July 6th, give or take a week.
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, it's too bad, but get something going, it would be good.
Corey, I just want to say thank you. I know this
Yeah.
has been really hard on you, because you have wanted to have the same program that we've had other years. And just with what had to happen with so many of your staff being furloughed and having to work with the city and being tasked with please help us find another alternative where kids can play ball and such. I just really want to commend you, because I know this has been really difficult for you, and you've done a great job, so thank you.
Thanks.
Did you want to make a motion?
Yes, I move to approve and to adopt the Baxter Park Recreation Budget, which includes a cancellation of the 2020 summer programming as scheduled, resulting from executive orders.
Second.
Can I add something? At one time, it was mentioned by Chair Hagelin to also add to adopt the revised plan. Do you want to add that to your motion?
Yes, and then also to adopt the revised plan.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Okay, great, thank you. So we have a motion by Director Blackland, second by Director Campbell. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Next up will be Read Well by third grade literacy report. Jill. Here it comes.
Oh, as Tim walks in.
Sorry to keep you two waiting.
No problem. So, thank you for letting us come and share with you about the local literacy plan for Reedwell by grade 3, right there. So, the legislation states that we have to really have about 8 components within our literacy plan. The 8 components are: what is our goal for our students? How do we know if children are making adequate progress? How do we keep our parents informed of that progress? And then when they're not making that progress, what are we doing for them? And then on to that, the next. When our kids aren't making the progress we need, what is the professional development that the teachers need in order to be successful and help enrich and provide some of those other opportunities? We also have embedded in what our comprehensive approach is to teaching literacy, not only in our core instruction, but also in our interventions. And then we have in section 7, the component of cross-cultural competence. And our district has worked really hard around this, specifically over the course of the last probably 2 years. But again, still more opportunities there. And then the last component has been fairly new to us within the last 2 years. It's the dyslexia and convergence insufficiency disorder component. That component, I'll share with you a couple of the different pieces that we have in place for that. So in the first tab at the bottom where it says local literacy plan, we have, the actual plan is embedded in there that we have put on to the district website in accordance with the state statute. And then the bottom tab is the actual data submission. So these are the 2 main components that the state requires in order for us to receive the allocation of close to about $500,000 each year. So the data submission is basically my notes, and then Sue Anderson and I work together to enter that data onto the state's website. Because the dyslexia component is so new, I thought I would share just a little bit more about that with you. There are 4 areas that we focus on according to what the Minnesota Department of Education has kind of outlined for us. They say that the 4 areas that we need to know to focus on are poor phonemic awareness, poor decoding, poor spelling or encoding, and poor orthographic memory and recall. And so we have about 6 assessments that we do in order to screen our learners. The data from those assessments, kind of outlining who we believe are showing indication that they are suffering from dyslexia, is also within that data submission on that tab. About 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we also created a teacher plan. Embedded within that teacher plan is if-then statements. So if a child is struggling with poor phonemic awareness, then in Tier 1, so core instruction, what are we doing? In Tier 2, so with our title and our interventionists, what are they specifically doing? And then Tier 3 for our special ed, kind of more focused and more intensive instruction. So there's if-then statements throughout each of those main components. There's also a section on resources and articles for teachers. We have a section on interventions that really outline and are really prescriptive and descriptive. And then we have district forums. So every year at the spring team meetings at the elementary level, the teachers, the coaches get together, they meet, they look at their data. If children are not making progress for multiple data periods, and we've been meeting around them, then they're required by law to make contact with parents and let them know 3 things. 1, your child is performing below grade level. 2, what interventions and other work are we doing with the children in order to try to close those gaps for them. And then 3, what are some things that they can do at home? So, and then along with those district forms, I use those to report out to the state. And I've also, on the last page, included a link to the dyslexia plan that I use, that we've created for the teachers. That's it.
What we're asking for is it's board action to acknowledge that we've provided the report and answered any questions that the board may have. The submission of the report is a mandatory submission annually done, and there is funding tied to it to the tune of about $500,000 a year for the district. So those are the compliance pieces. What we've been able to do here is leverage those expectations as part of the impetus for the district-wide MTSS RTI system. So as that work continues, it's really built on the shoulders of the work that Mrs. Bjorgi and her team did in the creation of this. So when I brought through Read Well as a special ed intervention a couple of board meetings ago, you saw reference to an RTI MTS system for literacy at the elementary level. That template and the foundations of that were built on the work that Mrs. Bjorgi did with her team to make sure that we have complete integration between core instruction, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 being core instruction, Tier 2 being outside the class or extra support, whereas Tier 3, whether it's special ed or not, is highly explicit, highly intensive, individualized support for a student. So there's some foundational pieces here in our literacy plan that Mrs. Bjorgi's team created and should be recognized.
Good, thank you. Any questions from board?
I love that we're contacting the parents and that we're giving them tools to use. Is that new then? Or,
We've been doing it since the legislation came out.
okay,
And I think the tracking piece has become more rigorous
Okay.
over the course of the last couple of years, but yes,
So-
it's fairly new.
okay. Do we have any feedback on how that's working or if there's,
You know, I think we can, it goes back to how amazing our teachers are. I don't think that this is really anything new. We're actually just doing a better job of documenting it. Many of our teachers were already, when children weren't making progress, they were already connecting with their families and letting them know that, hey, our system is set up with conferences and, any of our children who are on IEPs, they're meeting regularly, those special ed staff are meeting regularly, so it's not anything too
but possibly the tools part? I don't
The
remember
tools
that
part is-
happening at conferences or, yeah.
yes.
Having that systemic expectation across all 6 elementaries is the new piece. You know, people were trying to solve that same challenge individually, either by grade level or by site. Now with the compliance requirement, it gives us the ability to standardize that. And so it adds strength to the guaranteed and viable nature of the program we're doing. To your original question about how well do we know it's going, well, the 2018-19 data serves as baseline data. The 2019-20 data is interrupted data, and I would be reluctant to compare.
For this report, we actually submitted September data to the state, so when you go in to look at the submission, we did not use our spring data because we were not able to use benchmark assessment system and some of our other assessments to Fidelity. So we went back and used September data because that is when we assessed all of our learners. And then after that, in November and in February, we have a diminishing testing model, so we're only testing our children who are below benchmark.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
I'll move approval of the annual Read Well by third grade literacy report as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Director Nelson, second by Director Blacklands for approval of a Read Well third grade literacy. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well done.
Thank you, Jill.
Next up will be Forest View Middle School, grades 5 through 8, language arts. Mr. Murtha.
Thank you. This is the tail end. Today's 2 requests are the last of the 2019-20 curriculum work that we had set out to do, some of which was started more than 2 years ago. So this is kind of a special moment. We're closing out process, and then we'll take July off. We'll turn around and start up for the 2020-21 curriculum work. The purpose of the curriculum improvement process is to ensure that each District 1A1 student has access to a rigorous, guaranteed, and viable curriculum. So each of the curriculum groups, as you know, brings forth evidence of reviewing the standards, reviewing the evidence-based practices involved in instruction and assessment, and then they lay out through a process of prioritizing the standards what they feel is the best way to approach fulfilling the standards as the promise to the community of what kids will know and be able to do. And in case of the language arts team for Forest View, what they've selected on is the vertical alignment of the writing standards 5 through 8 for the purpose of creating an organizational spine that they can wrap around their open education resource work around. So they have some anchor to look at. So, and they chose to start with the writing standards because historically this was an area where we did not have much vertical alignment in the writing standards. So they addressed that, used that as the opportunity to do this. The reason there are 2 different resources in play, everyone knows my fondness for standardizing both resource and structure, but the instructional experience, the instructional conditions for 5th grade are different than grades 6, 7, and 8. 6, 7, 8 operate on a standard middle school teamed bell structure, whereas 5th grade still has a classical literacy block to it. It's closer to an elementary structure. So the resource that they chose in terms of being a writer, which is a resource that was actually seriously considered at the original elementary literacy adoption 5 years ago, and correlates well to the guided reading work that they do in the elementary and picks up some of that work, serves as a good transition to a more structured and traditional product in HMH Writable. The innovative element of that is it provides a digital writing environment for kids to write, to share, to revise, compose, and that sort of work. So that's the recommendation brought forward. You've seen the presentation from the teacher team, and it comes with the District Advisory Committee's recommendation as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I so move approval of the resolution for Forest View Middle School grade 5, 8 language arts adoption.
I second.
Thank you. Motion by Director Campbell, second by Director Blacklands for approval of the resolution. Any further discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call.
Director Campbell,
Yes.
Director Haglund,
Yes.
Director Kern,
Yes.
Director Nelson,
Yes.
Director Nystrom is gone, Director Blacklands,
Yes.
all present in favor.
Thank you. Next up will be Brainerd High School Intermediate Algebra Adoption. Mr. Murtha again.
This team was offered to the board earlier in the year as a celebration of work around OER, and I believe that the board felt very comfortable and confident in the work they're doing. They finally have the documentation completed for the work that they have done, so I don't think I need to spend as much time laying out what they've done. This is a true open education resource course. Their only use of self-created resources, assessments, instructionally, and they've owned it. They serve as a model for many of the other departments and how they've gone forward. And it's not just that they're doing it digitally, but with an open resources, but also the use of formative assessments, and because of the technology involved, their ability to respond to what the formative assessments tell them and support students in meeting the standards. So it allows them to differentiate, it allows them to intervene. It is right now a model for us in what we're doing.
I had to laugh watching the video on this, and I don't know which teacher it was because you couldn't see their faces, but she said, "We are as common gets." She was talking about how they teach commonly the same thing across, but they're not as common gets. They're pretty amazing teachers, so.
They're commonly uncommon.
Yes.
Yeah, this is definitely a game changer, I think, in terms of
Yeah.
how we go about this and
Yeah.
teamwork and all across the board.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Okay.
I'll move approval of the resolution for the high school intermediate algebra adoption.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Director Nelson, second by Director Blacklands for approval of the high school intermediate algebra. Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Director Haglund?
Yes?
Director Kern?
Yes.
Director Nelson?
Yes.
I'll skip Director Nystrom. Director Blacklands?
Yes.
Director Campbell?
Yes.
All present in favor.
Thank you.
Pardon the question. Director Hagelin, you asked a question of Ms. Porish around expenditure on books. Is that something you wish me to follow up at this time with, or?
No, that's fine, because it was a bigger question on the overall return. So, yeah, thank you, though. I figured you would have that information.
Yes, disaggregated by level. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I want to commend Tim and Heidi Hahn on just an incredible job of leading the last 3 days. It was phenomenal, Tim, and you need to be recognized.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank
That's
you. Well done.
wonderful. Okay, next up is MSBA dues. Lane, I don't know if you had any comments on that, or?
The only thing I'd like to add here is, if you remember back a couple board meetings ago, we asked to have you accept Board Book Premier, which is the updated version of Board Book. And Janet has been working with that program, as have some other school boards throughout the state. And they're finding it to be an extremely difficult program in which to use. Maybe some of you have found that as well. And we would like to adjust the MSBA dues and to try using Google Docs and to kind of develop our own form of board book rather than investing in board book. And it would be a $1,200 savings, correct? Or $1,250 savings, if you guys are okay with us trying to do it on our own rather than, it just got really cumbersome and didn't
I'm
seem
all
like.
for it. I felt
Saving
it's been,
money?
well, that too, of course. But,
Keep
yeah.
Janet busy for a while.
I've created a template that looks exactly what we've been using for the last 10 years in the Google Docs. So we will follow exactly the same format.
Okay,
That'd be great.
sounds good. So that's off of this 12?
Yes, yep. I can look
Cha-ching.
in here for sure.
Okay,
So,
The board book piece, $1,225 less than.
13,000.
1225, okay.
And it's only $12.25 because we've already prepaid for 6 months. So hopefully we'll be able to get our credit back.
okay, great.
I would so move to approve the 2021 MSBA Association dues renewal for 7/1/20 through 6/30/21 in the amount of, if my math is correct, $12,878. It's the 14,223 minus the 1225.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Director Kern, second by Director Campbell for approval of the MSBA dues as presented. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up is approval of our MREA membership dues. Any comments on that, Lane, or is this? Okay.
I'll move the approval of those dues.
Second.
Second was Sue. Thank you. Motion by Director Nelson, second by Director Kern for approval of the MREA dues as presented of $2,500. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Last item on our agenda is a resolution agreement with St. Cloud State University.
This just allows us to have student teachers working with our kids, and great opportunity for us to meet some incoming teachers and to help them, to mentor them, but also to look for the next round of teachers in our school. So I'd recommend approval.
I so move approval of the resolution with St. Cloud State University.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Director Campbell, second by Director Kern. Any further discussion? Not roll call?
Director Kern?
Yes.
Director Nelson?
Yes.
I will skip Director Nystrom. Director Black Lance?
Yes.
Director Campbell?
Yes.
Director Haglund?
Yes.
All present in favor.
Okay, great, thank you. Last piece is our informational. I don't know if Tim has more things he wants to talk to us about. Or Marcy from a business service report.
Nice when people can just be in here, won't it?
Yeah. How about superintendent's report?
You know, the only thing I have is, can you believe that we're at the end of the school year, that end of the 1920 school year? It was quite a crazy year, but anyway. And then the other thing is, we'll do building tours on July 13th before the board meeting, and you can see the schedule, and so we're excited to look at them. But again, we'll drive ourselves and meet at the locations, so people can meet us whenever they're free.
Okay, great. Hi, Marcy.
Hi. The only thing I had was financial reports in your packet. You'll see that we were down 0.15 in general fund, 2.93 in food service. So some of those savings that Lane had discussed earlier with COVID, we're starting to see that in the May report. And then June will not be submitted until we've closed out, so there will be no financial report for next month. But as I said, I'll do a report on enrollment. And then coming up to, we'll have the LTFM plan for you guys to approve. That's all I had. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So our next school board meeting is scheduled for July 13th, and I know we'll have to continue with the virtual, but I believe, and maybe if we could just get some confirmation that we can expand up to 25 folks in this room. If we could just get some confirmation on that, so that way we can have our, as you were saying, like, we can have our presenters here and additional public in here as well.
It'd be nice, and ICS too, it'd be nice to have them on site.
Yeah. Okay, anything else to come before the board? How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Thanks for the